As a mechanical engineering major, I didn't know that there was a career for me in tech. I've never, just having a mechanical engineering background, like they don't teach technology in the curriculum at the school I went to. So I never knew that there was a career for me at a tech company because, eventually your major is irrelevant, right?
So I just want to say I'm so excited to have Calicia on with us from oil and gas to Xbox to hear her journey, how she got there. Stay tuned, guys. This is going to be really good.
Hey, welcome to the Inside Guys. This is Wole,
This is David.
and today we have a guest with us.
Hi, I'm Calicia.
Now, Calicia is with Microsoft, and today we're going to talk about something that I've always been really curious about, and that's career changers. We're going to hear from Calicia about how she changed careers completely and pivoted into a new industry. So, Calicia, I'm glad you're here with us. I'm really fascinated by your story. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm originally from Detroit, Michigan, born and raised. I then went to school in Florida, majored in mechanical engineering. My first job out of school, I moved to Tennessee, got laid off within the first 9 months, decided to go to grad school. And so I moved to Baton Rouge, attended grad school for a couple of years. Then I joined Dow Chemical Company in New Orleans. I worked there for a couple of years. Had a bunch of friends in Houston, so I really wanted to get to the big city. Ended up attending the National Society of Black Engineers, the NSBE conference that year. Talked to several oil companies because I wanted to get into big oil. Got a job with Chevron and moved to Houston. I was in Houston with Chevron for about 8 years before transitioning over to Microsoft.
Microsoft. Nice.
Yeah,
Very nice.
absolutely. Good place to land. So, so you're living in Houston right now, and you just mentioned you're at Microsoft. Tell me what you do at Microsoft and when did you start?
So I started at Microsoft in April 2021. I am a senior product manager on the Xbox team. I've worked on a couple of different projects over the last 2 years at Microsoft, and currently currently transitioning to a new team. So this will be my third project in 2 years that I've been here on the gaming side.
Very nice.
So you mentioned what you did before. So you talked about the oil and gas industry and some of the things you did before coming to Microsoft. And this conversation is about that complete career pivot you made. So why don't we go back in time a little bit and talk about the things you were doing before you came to Microsoft, the types of jobs you had, where you worked, what you were doing. Let's get into some details about what you did before.
Sure. So after I received my master's degree, I was working at Dow Chemical, which is a chemical plant out in New Orleans. Hard hat, steel toe boots. I was a maintenance engineer at the time. So anytime something broke, I was there to fix it of course, with a team, of course. So I worked on a lot of fixed equipment, which is like vessels, heat exchangers, as well as rotating equipment such as pumps, compressors, turbines. And I loved it. I loved the hands-on work. I loved being out in the field. I loved just learning, being able to climb around in different vessels. Then I moved to Houston with Chevron, where I worked upstream oil and gas. So my first project was mainly working on subsea equipment, just huge equipment that basically sits on the bottom of the ocean floor to bring the oil that we drill to surface. So that was pretty cool, being able to go to the fabrication yards in the Houston area to see the equipment in real life. And then after a few years, I moved out to West Texas and Midland, Texas, where I was a facilities engineer, where I would build oil, water, and gas facilities to separate the three of those before they actually went to the refinery. Another hands-on, out in the field type of role, which I really enjoyed because I learned by doing. So that was really good for me. Built several awesome relationships. And I really liked the fulfillment of seeing something from beginning to end, walking out there with literally nothing but dirt. And then, 9 months later, I have built an entire facility that's in operation. So that's what I did for the majority of my career, just having that mechanical engineering background that was true, mechanical engineering work and project management.
Yeah, you were doing your thing. That's nice to
Yeah.
hear. That's deep, as they say. Very very nice.
How long were you doing this? I mean, you talked about a lot there, working at plants, working on offshore vessels. I mean, how long was this part of your career?
That was in total 2 years at Dow and 8 at Chevron, so a total of 10.
Okay. And you, and I think I heard you correctly. You said hard hats and steel-toed boots were that was your outfit.
That was my outfit, my
Yeah.
my fire retardant clothing. I never had to think about what I had to wear to work because it was the same thing every day.
Your shop. I guess that means your wardrobe budget could be kind of.
Yeah,
You didn't have to be too extravagant. Um,
exactly.
and but
Yeah. I will say it does sound like a lot of technology, right, in those jobs. So did you deal with any kind of big tech, traditional computer systems, or any of that stuff in those roles?
Nothing. The most technology I dealt with was having an iPad out in the field with me and being able to red line drawings there on site, so I wouldn't have to do it when I'm back in the office.
Wow.
That was my introduction to OneNote and just different softwares like that. But other than that, I knew nothing. I didn't know anything
Wow.
about CPUs, GPUs, data centers, or anything. So.
Wow.
yeah,
Interesting.
that's actually a good segue. So speaking of that, what was your when you were working in that role in those different companies? What was your sort of impression of technology companies like a Microsoft? Like how did you think about those companies if you did at all?
I really didn't know what they did. I guess that I was like, well, I'm a mechanical engineering background. They're automatically going to put me in a hardware job. And I didn't want to do hardware. It didn't sound really interesting. It wasn't until I just started following people on LinkedIn and reaching out to them, just learning more about what their role actually entailed. That's when I learned about product management. Product management is not a major in school that you can just go major in an undergrad. It's kind of something that you almost fall into, honestly. Or, I mean, now you have product management internships for students in school right now, but I didn't know anything about it. So as I started to learn more about it, it really aligned with what I was looking for in a career. Big picture is important for me. I want to make sure that I'm making an impact in someone's life, that someone is enjoying the things that I'm working on at work. When I was in oil and gas and out in the field with my, hard hat, steel toe boots, I felt like nobody cared that I was out here building a facility. But if I work at a tech company, a brand that people use every day, I feel like the work that I'm doing is impactful. So that was super important for me.
Let me take a step back because you talked about reaching out to people on LinkedIn, understanding what roles in technology would be a good fit for you. So it sounds like going back in time when you were still working in that mechanical engineering world, at some point you had some epiphany or something. What made you even seek out a change in your career? Like, let's go back to that point.
Yeah. So back in 2020, everyone at Chevron had to reapply for their job. Everybody. So you applied for the job you currently had, and you were able to write down 3 others. And during that process, it was super overwhelming for one. And I really couldn't find another job that I wanted. Like, nothing really seemed interesting to me. So that's when I knew that I had to make a change.
Okay, so at that point, when you had to, the company was already your previous company was already asking for you to change roles or look at something else. You decided to look more broadly and so what made you think about working at Microsoft? And I'm guessing maybe you looked at some other technology companies, sort of out of the domain that you had worked in, and then also what gave you the confidence to even look in those other directions?
Honestly, it was with everything that was going on back in 2020, I was really looking at companies that were making statements and having a stance on something related to the social justice realm. I felt like a lot of the oil companies were quiet. They didn't say anything, not even acknowledge it. And so it made me feel like if they're not going to publicly acknowledge it, I wonder if they actually care about me as an individual. And so I was seeing all the companies, of course, a lot of tech companies, they're more sorry, I don't even know the word, but they're more prone to, make statements. So I just felt like I felt like I would belong there. I felt more welcomed and comfortable. So that's what kind of piqued my interest in the tech space just from that whole experience back in 2020. And then the confidence, they always say it's easier to find a job while you already have one. So I was willing to bet on myself and just give myself an opportunity to, I hadn't interviewed in 8 years. Like, that sounds crazy, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm like, let me brush up on my interview skills. At least I can do that. If this doesn't work out, hey, at least I've interviewed once in 8 years, and I kind of, brushed the dust off my interviewing skills. So I at least had that to take away from it. But I just betted on myself. Just took a chance. I'm like, if I don't do it, if not now, then when? So.
Very nice. Right. What made you pick that particular job to focus on at Microsoft?
Well, I actually attended a conference, a virtual conference, and I downloaded the attendee list. And so after I downloaded the attendee list, I was pretty much going down the list, looking at everyone that was outside of energy. And so I was connecting with people at NASDAQ and Microsoft and Target and all these awesome companies, learning about their roles. I saw the passion that they had for the careers that they were in. I'm like, man, I really want to be passionate about my job like you are, So one of the people that I randomly messaged on LinkedIn was the guy that hired me. So I just sent him a cold message like, hey, I saw you also attended the virtual conference. I saw your name on the attendee list. Do you have time for a coffee chat? And during our coffee chat, we started talking about, my career, if I was happy, what I want out of my career. And it just so happened that he was actually creating a new team. So he was like, hey, I'm working with HR. I'm building a new team. Once we have the job description available, I'll send it to you. No pressure. Feel free to apply if you want. And we just always kept in touch. And I'm like, you know what? Let me just apply and see what happens, So that's kind of how I got on with Xbox. I didn't target Xbox specifically, but it was just how everything was, ended up. Played out.
Wole and I have talked about it many times. So you started off with networking, and that led you to meet the right person, and then led to exposure to a job and a title that you didn't even have any pre-knowledge of. So
right.
Yeah, networking is very powerful. So that's good to hear. That's how you started.
Yeah, and the thing that for me, I mean, definitely I agree with Dave. That is such a powerful story because not only were you networking in lots of different ways, so by doing that, you created opportunity for yourself, but you reached out to someone cold. Like most people wouldn't think that something like that would lead to a job. But that did it for you. And then the other thing that's powerful for me is that you ended up in Xbox. Like even people who work at Microsoft want to work in Xbox. Like, it is like the coolest part of the company to work in. And so it's an incredible story. So tell me about, so this person you met suggested to you to go ahead and apply for the job. Tell me what you were feeling at that time, all the way up into the interview. Like, what was that process like? Were you tell me about how you were feeling?
Yeah, the thing that was top of mind for me is, how do I make my experience something that they could understand? Because I felt like my resume, my LinkedIn profile was very heavy engineering focus. And I'm like, okay, my official title is facility engineer. That means absolutely nothing to Microsoft. So I'm like, how do I convert my experience and my title and everything that I've done in a way that is transferable, really highlighting those transferable skills in a way that it makes sense to them. I'm looking at the job description, trying to, match keywords to my resume and just make it sound like more like a product manager. Well, it was the program manager title at the time. So just make it seem more relatable to program management. So I spent a lot of time just looking at various job descriptions and learning more of the lingo in tech so that I can use that same language on my LinkedIn profile and on my resume. So that was one thing. And I also was like, oh my gosh, am I ready to move to Seattle? Do I want to move to Seattle? Will they let me, stay in Houston? So all those relocation thoughts came to mind. And just like kind of excitement too, so you had this fear of the unknown, but also excited for an awesome new opportunity. So just kind of just took it all one day at a time.
Nice. Very
That's
nice.
great. I like what you were saying there. So you really, you said a couple things that really resonated with me. So you translated your experience into something that would make sense for the new role, and you tailored the language of your resume and your experience into something that could be an asset. And I'm sure you position yourself and the things that were different about your experiences versus maybe the traditional person who might be coming into that role. You positioned it as an asset for the organization. So that's incredible. So I'm actually along those lines. I'm curious as to during your interviews, like what happened how did you do that in your interviews, and what kind of feedback and responses? Because again, you're the atypical person interviewing for this type of a role.
Yeah, I remember they asked me about like how I influence people. How do I prioritize my task when, especially as a program and product manager, you'll have all these people saying, hey, we need this and that, and this and that. So how do you tell them no? How do you like prioritize what's going to be in the next planning cycle and what's not? And so I just think back to my experience working with operations out in the oil field. When we would do our walkthroughs, they'll be like, oh, we don't like this valve, it doesn't work, we need to switch this out or change this, and this needs to be changed. And I've had to manage that manage that with operations, because we had standard drawings. So I always have to say, well, if it's not in our standard package, I can't just change these one-offs because the drawings are going to be completely wrong. So there's a process that we have to go through to make these changes. So I just always took the feedback, took it back to the design team. But I would try to like give examples like that as far as like managing priorities and influencing people that don't necessarily report to me. Getting my boss to allow me to go look at a piece of equipment at the original manufacturer's facility before it actually came to me, because it's easier for them to change something on the vessel at their facility versus when it comes to me and I'm in the middle of nowhere and I don't have the resources right there on hand. So I would just try to think through some examples as far as like working in teams. I forget the 3 main categories that they asked me about during my interview, but I'll just try to provide examples that actually make sense and kind of walk them through it. So that kind of tells a story about the things that I've dealt with in the past.
Awesome. So one of the things when we spoke to you a few weeks ago in preparation, going back to the topic of the question about what was your impression of technology companies? What was your impression, or what was your understanding of technology sales?
Yeah.
That's what Dave and I do, and that's what we've done for most of our careers. And so what you shared with us was kind of enlightening as far as outside looking in, what people think about technology sales. So tell us again, what was your impression of the technology sales types of roles?
Yeah, tech sales is so new to me. I think it's still new. When I think of a salesperson, I think of the people that, are at these booths inside of a mall trying to like hand you a sample or trying to like flat iron my hair, trying to sell a flat iron or something, like, and I just like ignore them or don't look their way so they're not making eye contact with me and things like that. Like that's when I think of it, salespeople. And so when I got to Microsoft and started learning more about tech sales, I still have this vision in my head of like somebody, going to a school or a different company with their briefcase and doing this whole sales pitch presentation, trying to get them to buy like Microsoft products. And I'm learning that it's not even like that at all. So, but that's my vision of sales. Like,
right.
I had no experience whatsoever with sales, but I hear it's a pretty lucrative career. So
Yeah, Dave, did you want to add anything onto that, or you just leave it at that?
Well, I was just thinking about me in the mall trying to sell shampoo or something. I'm
Yeah.
glad I'm glad I didn't have to take that route. There's nothing wrong with that, but I'm glad I didn't have to take that route. Yeah, sales is a unique animal. I think a lot of people don't think about sales. They think about in tech, a technology company, the deep engineering and technical aspects. But you have to have someone who builds the technology, manages the development of it, like you're doing now, and then you have to have somebody that then is external customer facing to sell it. So it's good to hear different phases of it because it takes the complete cycle, right, to have a successful tech company.
Yeah, and your perspective, and sort of your thoughts on what salespeople do in technology companies is one of the reasons that Dave and I started this channel, just to get just to communicate with people and talk about the types of roles and the types of careers you can have. Because most people, when they think about technology companies, they probably are thinking about things more like what you do. But to Dave's point, there's a complete other side of it as well. So anyway, so you obviously you were successful in your interview. You landed in the company. So talk about so you mentioned you work in Xbox. Now everybody knows what Xbox is, but what was your first job in Xbox, and what were you responsible for? If you can sort of paint that picture for those who are watching. And by the way, for those watching, this is a good time to like and subscribe. And then if you've got questions about some of the experiences that Calicia had, or if you have questions, or if you have experience around changing careers, please make a comment about that as well. So, Calicia, can you talk about what your initial roles were, what your initial role was at Microsoft?